Let me be completely honest with you right from the start. I am the most skeptical person you will ever meet. I do not believe in ghosts. I do not believe in demons. I do not believe in anything that goes bump in the night. If someone tells me a story about something supernatural, I am usually the first person to roll my eyes and walk away. That is exactly why what happened to me a few weeks ago has left me completely speechless. I cannot explain it. I have tried to find a logical answer every single day since it happened, and I have come up with nothing. I am writing all of this down while every detail is still fresh in my mind because I need answers. I need someone out there to tell me, what the hell happened to me? To be honest, I am still terrified. I do not scare easily. I never have. But now, I cannot even sleep in my own apartment, and I do not even live in that house. Let me start from the beginning. My friend Steve and his wife had been planning a weekend getaway for their anniversary. They do not get to travel alone very often because they have 2 young children and a dog. Steve is not exactly struggling with money. He built this massive house in the middle of nowhere because he loves privacy. And honestly, if you have the money to do that, I cannot blame you. The timing worked out perfectly because their 2 kids were going on a school trip out of town for the weekend. That meant Steve and his wife would finally have the house completely to themselves. Just the 2 of them and the dog. When Steve told me about their plans, I immediately offered to come over and watch the dog for the weekend so they could enjoy a romantic trip without any worries. Steve agreed right away. The plan was simple. I would show up on Friday afternoon, stay through Sunday, and take care of his beautiful golden retriever. I do not work weekends, so I had nothing else going on. Steve went overboard stocking the house with food and snacks for me. He made sure I had everything I possibly could need. It was way too much for a simple pet-sitting job, but I was not about to complain. I love dogs and I love quiet weekends in the middle of nowhere. For me, this was a win-win situation, or at least that is what I thought at the time. Now let me get to the part that still makes my blood run cold. Friday night was completely normal. The dog and I hung out on the couch and watched movies. Steve sent me a text around 9 p.m. that said, "Do not get scared being all alone in that house." It can get pretty spooky at night when you are by yourself. I just laughed and texted him back to shut up. Like I said, I do not scare easily. Empty houses do not bother me. Being alone in the middle of nowhere does not bother me. I am well aware that anything can happen at any time, but I just do not get scared. I went to sleep in the spare bedroom around 1 in the morning. Steve's dog curled up right next to me. Everything was fine until 3:21 in the morning. That is when I woke up to the sound of the dog barking like I have never heard any dog bark before. It was loud. It was vicious. It was the kind of barking that makes your heart stop for a second. I will admit that the sound scared me, but it was more of a surprise scare than a real fear. At least that is what I told myself as I got out of bed. I made my way downstairs, and the entire time, the dog never stopped barking for even a single second. I finally found him in the kitchen. He was standing in front of the door that led down to the basement. Every single hair on his back was standing straight up. His entire body was rigid. He looked like he had seen something absolutely terrifying. I called his name over and over, trying to calm him down, but he would not listen to me. He just kept barking and barking. Then I grabbed the doorknob. That is when the dog completely lost his mind. He started running back and forth, barking, like something was about to burst through that door. My first thought was that maybe someone had broken in and was hiding in the basement. That seemed possible, but also very unlikely. Steve has all kinds of expensive security equipment everywhere. Breaking into that house is not easy. I grabbed a large knife from the kitchen and opened the basement door. The dog ran to the doorway, but he would not go down. He just stood at the top of the stairs and growled. His hair was still sticking straight up. I turned on the basement light and started walking down the stairs. I started yelling, pretending to be much tougher than I actually am, but I did not hear anything. I did not see anything. I tried calling the dog to come down with me, but he would not move an inch. I searched the entire basement. It is a finished basement, so I looked in every closet, every corner, behind every piece of furniture, and even inside the bathroom. There was no intruder. There were no ghosts. There was nothing out of the ordinary except for one thing. It was freezing cold. down there. I know basements are usually cooler than the rest of the house, but I have been in that basement a million times. It is never that cold. Even in the middle of winter, it is never that cold. But at the end of the day, a cold basement is not a reason to panic. I spent the rest of the night in the living room. It took a while, but the dog finally calmed down and we both fell back asleep. The next morning, the dog was completely fine. We played outside for a while, and I spent most of the day listening to music and watching movies. I went down to the basement at one point during the day, and the temperature was completely normal. It felt like the rest of the house. I did not think much about it, and just went about my day. That night, I decided to sleep on the couch, just in case the dog had another episode at the basement door. I wanted to stay awake, but I ended up falling asleep while watching a movie. Then, at almost the exact same time as the night before, I woke up to the dog losing his mind again. He was barking like the house was on fire. I ran into the kitchen and tried to get him to stop, but he would not listen to me for the second night in a row. But this night was different. The dog was even more agitated than he had been the previous night. He was shaking. He was crying. When I grabbed the doorknob this time, instead of barking, he started to whimper. It was the strangest thing I have ever seen. I let go of the knob and tried to comfort him, and he started barking again. I grabbed the knob one more time and went downstairs. The dog started crying again. He still would not follow me. This time, the basement was cold again, just like the night before, but there was something new. The smell. It was absolutely horrible. I do not even know how to describe it. It was just bad. It was the kind of smell that makes your stomach turn. But the strangest thing was that some of the pictures on the wall had been knocked over. The bar stools in the basement were also knocked to the ground. Nothing else was out of place. Nothing else was damaged. Just the pictures and the stools. I picked everything up and set them back where they belonged. The smell was so strong that I could not stay down there any longer. I went back upstairs and the dog kept barking for another 30 minutes. I sat there trying to figure out what could possibly be causing that smell. When the dog finally calmed down, I gave him a treat and we both fell asleep. When I woke up in the morning, I went down to the basement to try to find the source of the smell, but it was completely gone. Not even a hint of it remained. And the dog followed me down the stairs without any hesitation. He was happy. He was wagging his tail. For 2 nights, that dog refused to go anywhere near that basement. Now he was acting like nothing had ever happened. I was completely confused. I had no explanation for any of it. Steve got home around 1 in the morning. His dog was jumping all over him with joy. His wife took the dog outside and I started catching up with Steve. He asked how everything went. I told him that for the most part, everything was great. He gave me a confused look when I said for the most part, so I told him everything that had happened in detail. I expected him to laugh. I expected him to think I was playing a joke on him, but he did not laugh. He did not even smile. He just stood there in silence. Finally, he looked down at the floor and told me that when the dog was a puppy, he used to have these barking fits. He would go crazy barking at that same basement door. Steve said it had not happened in years, so he had completely forgotten about it. They never knew what caused it. Then one night, the dog just stopped doing it. I could see that Steve was genuinely freaked out, way more freaked out than I was. We talked about it for a little while longer, but I kept telling him not to worry. I told him it was probably nothing. But it has been 2 weeks now, and I cannot stop thinking about it. Steve told me that since they have been home, the dog has been completely normal. No basement door episodes at all. I have tried to find a logical explanation for what happened, but I have found nothing. Every time I think I have figured it out, something does not add up. So I am asking you, can anyone out there explain why that dog was acting that way? What was that smell? Where did it come from? I am losing sleep over this, and I do not even live in that house anymore. I just need some kind of answer. The next story I am about to share with you happened a few years ago. The more time that passes, the scarier it becomes for me. I had just broken up with my boyfriend and moved into this small apartment. It was part of a larger complex. The complex itself was beautiful, quiet, and elegant. I quickly became friends with some of my neighbors. It felt like a nice little community. A few months after I moved in, I started hearing strange sounds at night. One night, while I was getting ready for bed, I thought I heard the sound of running footsteps in the hallway. I looked through the peephole on my door, but I did not see anything. There were no children living in my building, so I could not imagine who would be running around at that hour. I did not think much of it. The next few nights, I heard the same sound again. I did not bother getting up to look because it did not seem important. Let me mention something important here. My apartment was on the ground level. My windows faced a beautiful courtyard. The front door of the building required a key to get inside. It took me a while to get used to having my windows at ground level because anyone could walk right up to my bedroom window if they wanted to. I was not worried about anyone in that community doing something like that, but it was always in the back of my mind. That information is about to become very relevant. One night, I woke up to the sound of giggling outside my bedroom window. It was strange, but I assumed it was just some kids being stupid and hanging out too close to my window. I tapped on the glass and made a loud shushing sound. The giggling stopped for a second, and then I heard a faint tapping sound on the other side of the glass. That freaked me out, but I was not going to let some kids know that they had scared me. I grabbed the curtain and pulled it open as fast as I could. There was nobody there. I was just looking at the quiet courtyard. Even if there had been kids out there, I had no idea where they could have disappeared to so quickly. I closed the curtain and tried to forget about it. The giggling continued for a few more nights. I just learned to ignore it. I have young nieces and nephews, and I know that if you ignore their stupid pranks, they eventually stop. That was my plan. I assumed that if I stopped reacting, the giggling would stop. Unless they gave me a real reason to report them, I was not going to bother the apartment manager. 2 days later, I was at work when I received an email from the complex manager. She seemed short and serious. She asked if I could stop by the main office after work. She had something to show me, and she said it was urgent. I told her I would come by. I spent the whole day stressed out, worried that my rent check had bounced or something. When I showed up, she told me to lock the door behind me. She started speaking very quietly, almost in a whisper. A security guard came in and sat next to me. The manager told me that while the security guard was reviewing some footage, he found something disturbing. She showed me the security camera, footage from the hallway outside my apartment. Around 2 in the morning, 2 small figures in hoods approached my door. They looked like children, maybe 10 or 12 years old. In the grainy footage, they were just standing there. They were standing so close to my door that they were almost touching it. The scariest part was that when she fast-forwarded the footage, they did not move at all. For nearly 10 minutes, they just stood there, inches from my apartment door. Before they finally walked away, one of the figures reached for the doorknob and tried to open the door. You could clearly see them jiggling the handle several times. The door did not open. After that, they skipped away and disappeared from the camera's view. I was completely freaked out. Whoever these kids were, they were targeting me for some reason. I told the manager and the security guard about the giggling outside my window, but when they checked the footage from the courtyard cameras, they found nothing. We called the police and gave them a statement. The police said that if anything else happened, we should call them. But at that point, there was nothing they could do. The security guard tried to find where the kids had gone after they left my door, but it was like they had vanished. They could not find them on any other camera in the entire complex. The next night, I decided to stay awake. I was going to catch these kids one way or another, but that night there was nothing. No giggles, no sounds from the hallway. About a week later, I heard something coming from the hall around 1:30 in the morning. I muted my TV and listened carefully. I heard the sound of my doorknob rattling. The kids were back. I ran to the door and yelled at them to get away. I heard a child laughing. And then another voice, soft and quiet, whispered through the door. "Mom, we are home. Just open the door and let us in." I did not say anything. I looked through the peephole and saw 2 small figures standing with their heads down. The voice whispered again, "Please let us in. We are home now. Please." That last please sounded almost desperate. But I did not care. I yelled back that their mother did not live here anymore and that I was going to call the police. Both children started to giggle. Then the doorknob started shaking again. One of them started throwing their body against the door, but the door would not open. I stood there holding the door for what felt like an eternity. Then the laughing stopped. The doorknob stopped shaking. When I looked through the peephole one last time, nobody was there. I was still too afraid to open the door. I called the police. The cops assumed it was just local kids playing a prank on me. I did not argue because that seemed like the most logical explanation. I gave my statement, and that was that. A few days later, I ran into the apartment manager in the parking lot. She pulled me aside and asked if I had experienced anything else. I told her no, and that I was sure it was just some local kids. She made a strange face and told me she was not so sure. She said that the woman who had lived in my apartment before me was strange. She did not give me many details for privacy reasons, but she was fairly confident that something horrible had happened involving that woman's children. She did not elaborate. She did not give me a name. She just implied that something terrible had happened and then said she had already said too much. She told me to be careful and to keep my doors locked. I will never forget her walking away and saying that this was not a prank. As far as I know, those children never came back to my apartment while I was living there. I have spent a lot of time trying to figure out what happened. Who were those children? What did the apartment manager mean? Was she implying that those children were ghosts? I know that sounds insane, but you have to admit it is strange. The police and the security guard could not find where those children went after they left my door. And something else dawned on me after I moved out. There was no way those children could have gotten inside the building without a key. There were no children living in my building. So how did they get in? Where did they go? The more I think about this story, the more it terrifies me. I still do not believe in ghosts, but I cannot explain what happened. Neighborhood kids are the easy answer, but the more I replay the memories in my head, the more impossible that explanation seems. Maybe I really did experience something not from this world. The final story I am about to share with you happened about 10 years ago. It is without a doubt one of the most terrifying things that has ever happened to me. I stopped telling people this story because most of them say I am lying or making it up. My wife is the one who pushed me to write it all down. She said maybe someone out there has gone through something similar. So here it is. Back then, I was working a dead-end job. Just like most people, it was just a way to pay the bills. The boring routine of retail work was slowly draining the life out of me. One afternoon, as I was leaving work, I noticed something neon pink hanging from my car door handle. It was a sticky note with a friendly message written on it. It simply said, "You are special, and I hope you have an amazing day." There was a smiley face sticker on the note. I thought it was nice. Yeah, made me smile. I did not give it another thought. The next few days, every time I left work, there was another note in the same spot. I know some people would find that creepy, but I liked the attention. At that point in my life, I was not getting much attention from anyone. It felt good to be noticed. After 3 or 4 friendly messages, I decided to leave a note of my own. I parked for work the next morning, grabbed my own sticky notes, and wrote a message. I kept it friendly, but a little flirtatious. When I left work that afternoon, I was happy to find another note. My flirt had worked. This person was flirting back. I did not know if it was a joke or if it was serious, but either way, I kept the game going for a few days. The day before my day off, I left a note that said something like, "Do not miss me too much on my day off." When I left work, I found a sticky note with just a sad face drawn on it. I thought the game would end there. Someone was just having fun with me. I figured it would just fizzle out. I could not have been more wrong. When I woke up the next day, I did some things around the house. It was late morning when I finally went outside. I noticed something neon pink on my car door again. I could not believe my eyes. I walked up to the note slowly. It said, "You look cute when you are sleeping." That scared me. After a little while, I convinced myself that someone was just messing with me. It had to be someone I worked with who knew where I lived. That was the only thing that made sense. I crumpled up the note and threw it away. Went pa ahead. I returned to work. The notes continued for a few days. They started out friendly again, but by the third day of me not responding, they started to get mean. The messages now said things like, "You better answer me, and remember, I know where you live." I thought about calling the police, but I was still so sure it was someone I knew. I decided to leave one more note. I wrote a message saying to leave me alone or I would call the police. I did not actually plan to call the police, but I thought that if it was someone I knew, this would make them stop. When I left work that afternoon, my note was gone, and for the first time in a while, there were no new notes on my car. I felt relieved. I still wanted to know who it was, but if the notes had stopped, I was happy. That night, I woke up in the middle of the night because I thought I heard something. Ever since the note outside my house, I had been on edge. I sat up in bed and listened. Then I heard it again. It sounded like shuffling. I could not tell if it was just the house settling or something more alarming. I assumed I was just hearing things, but I was not taking any chances. I grabbed a baseball bat and made my way down the long hallway from my bedroom to the living room. With every step, I imagined the worst. If there was someone standing in my house, I do not think I would have been able to hit them. I am just not that kind of person. I made it to the end of the hallway and stopped. Whatever bravery I had when I left my bedroom was gone. From where I was standing, I could see the living room, the dining room, and the kitchen. I turned on the lights and scanned the room. I was too scared to move any further. I kept imagining someone hiding behind the couch. I stood there in silence for a minute. I heard nothing. I turned the lights off and walked quickly back to my bedroom. At any moment, I expected someone to come running after me. Thankfully, no one did. I locked my bedroom door and turned on the TV. I wanted to drown out the silence. I eventually fell asleep. When I woke up the next morning, I had almost forgotten how scared I had been. I walked to the kitchen to get some juice, and that is when I saw it. A bright pink sticky note was stuck to my refrigerator. It said, "You cannot keep me away." There was another smiley face. I stood there frozen for about 30 seconds. Then I ran to check every door and every window in my house. They were all still locked. I knew for a fact that no one had a key to my house. My family lived in another state. I was not close enough with anyone to trust them with a key. Somehow, this person had gotten inside my house and left a message on my fridge. I was not playing around anymore. I called the police and gave them all the information. They said they did an investigation, but they could not find anything useful. Random notes were not enough for them to go on. They checked the cameras in the parking lot where I worked, but my parking spot was not covered by any cameras. Employee parking was on the side of the store with no cameras at all. The police concluded that it had to be someone who knew me. I would have agreed if it were not for the note inside my locked house. I am obsessive about locking my doors. I know that no one had access to my house. I stayed at a friend's house for a couple of nights because I was not ready to sleep at my own place. We went to the hardware store and bought all new locks for every door. The first night back at my place, my friend stayed over. Nothing happened that night. A few months went by and nothing happened. No new notes at work. Nothing at my house. Then, over 2 months later, I left for work one morning and noticed one of those horrible pink notes on my front door. I grabbed it. It said, "I guess you do not want to play anymore." I called the police again, but they did not do much. I bought security cameras after that, but nothing ever happened again. Changing the locks on my house might have saved my life. Somehow, that person had a key to my house. That is the only thing that makes sense. What I cannot figure out is why me, and who was that person? Whenever I think back to that entire situation, I almost feel sick. I think about the night I heard something inside my house. There had to have been a person hiding somewhere just inches away from where I was standing. Why did they not hurt me? I wonder if messing with me was all they wanted. A friend once told me that when I went back to my room and locked the door, it was possible that the person tried to get in. Locking that door might have saved my life. It has been 10 years now. Nothing has happened since that last note. I have moved. I am married now. But every time I see those stupid pink sticky notes in a store, I think back to that horrible experience. Whatever the case may be, I am just happy I am still here to tell this story, and I hope you never have to experience anything like it.